like your life depends on it, which I love that title because connection, we use the word connection for a lot of different things. We use it a lot for social, Twitter connections, Facebook connections. We're making connections all the time, networking connections. But what's really cool is to kind of look at lifestyle and health, and ultimately how technology is going to connect people to safety, to ongoing monitoring, et cetera. It's kind of an endless list. So I'm really excited to welcome this next session. I want to introduce you to Michael Yang, who is the Managing Director at Comcast Ventures, and he will be leading this next session. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, hopefully we'll get everyone's blood juices post-lunch and have an invigorating conversation this afternoon. Let me start by just introducing our two panelists, or rather asking them to each introduce themselves. So why don't we start off with you?
Can you hear me? Okay, good. So at Qualcomm Life, we were looking at chronic care, and we were looking at systems that were based in the healthcare system. And it became evident to me that I wanted to look, is this what you want for the introduction?
Yes, please.
What I wanted to look at was out of hospital and look at the consumer market and the out-of-pocket market. Because it's pretty evident here in the US at least, the healthcare system is a difficult system to manage, and I don't know when they're really going to get to mHealth and when they'll look at us. To me, everyone in this room is the healthcare system. It's all of us, caring for our elder parents, caring for ourselves, caring for our loved ones. So I began to look at tools outside Qualcomm Life that were off the shelf, basically easy to deploy, and basically for independent living and individual empowerment. So one of the first ones I looked at was Lively. So I don't know if you know Lively or not. They build an independent living kit that basically within this box right here is a watch, a safety watch that has the Help I've Fallen functionality, steps, medication reminder, and sensors that go in the home to monitor the activities of daily living. Are they getting to the refrigerator? Are they getting to the drawers? So very simple. It's a consumer-based product, and I won't go into pricing at all. We can talk later, but it's affordable. I've been talking to health agencies in the UK and Scandinavia, agencies that want to deploy this to replace many of the systems they have, many of the more expensive systems. So that's what I've been doing, is searching for these types of products and services to help them get to market.
And I'm David Inns, the CEO of GreatCall. What GreatCall does is we provide technology to enable active aging. So we put devices in the hands of older consumers and apps in the hands of their caregivers that allow them to stay more connected with the goal of keeping them independent longer. So you've probably heard of our various devices. We have a simple device called the Jitterbug, which is a simple, easy-to-use, large-button cell phone. But it's actually a platform that has apps, and we've done everything from medication compliance to wellness coaching to emergency response built into those devices. We also have a touchscreen smartphone version of a similar device that's easy to use and has all of those mHealth capabilities built into it, as well as one of the first mobile personal emergency response products called 5-Star, which is a one-button waterproof device called the Splash. So by putting those products in older consumers' hands, we found we can keep them more compliant with their medications, more active. We can help them in the situations when they really need that help, whether it's in the house or out of the house, because all of our products are mobile. And we can keep the caregiver connected by feeding all that information back into an app that allows them to track and understand, without being too invasive, what is actually happening with their aging parent.
Great. So just, again, to reiterate the context here, we're focused more on seniors in an independent living, kind of active aging, as you put it, kind of context, less about an institutional setting and a provider setting that we've talked about earlier today in previous panels. But let me start off and ask each of you to comment on the following. What's going on in society in terms of the relationship between the senior and kind of the adult child who's providing care to them? You know, what are the dynamics going on over there? And then weave that into the role of technology in terms of changing that relationship.
So I can start. We've done a lot of research into this area, obviously, but the first fact is the recent study that RAND put out showing that if you actually take the hours that are being spent with family caregivers, non-professional family caregivers in the United States, and apply the minimum wage to that, it's about a $522 billion a year cost now, and it's growing really rapidly. And that is productivity of people that comes straight out of the economy. So it's a very expensive situation, the amount of time that has to happen. Now, but that's just the numbers. There's a really emotional side of this where when we look at caregivers, we find there's a large group of people that you can say from that are very happy about their family caregiving role. They love mom, they love dad, they're really happy about that they can help and that they can be a part of their lives and keeping them independent longer, to the people who are very frustrated that mom and dad are not listening to me, they're not cooperating with the things I'm trying to do, I'm sick and tired of it, it's really exhausting and it's extremely stressful. So you have this really wide range of people that are out there today, and they need solutions to help them improve their relationship and their productivity in actually taking care of their parents.
Yeah, I would say that it's the relationship, it really changes. Both sides have peace of mind because the parent doesn't want the child calling and checking in and reminding, and the kids don't want to call and necessarily be that person doing that. So what happens with the system I'm working with, Lively, you have sensors with happy faces and sad faces that give you an idea. Is the refrigerator being opened? Are the cupboards being opened? Are they getting out of the house, counting steps? So then it changes the conversation. So then the elder knows that they're being watched and cared for, and it's a reminder when something is going wrong. So they know that there's more of a safety line out there rather than a nag that's going to be pestering them. It's also very non-invasive. There's no cameras. It's all passive. Are all of the devices moving? And what's interesting is we've had lots of different interest from this, from not only elder care, but for the mentally ill and also disabled in different parts of the world, where they want to make sure that this person is moving through their daily activities. And I think that's one thing that's going to come up very, very strongly about activity in itself, especially when you look at this elder population. You can predict a lot on changes in that behavior and intervene quickly. That's the other key. You want to get there before an accident happens. The traditional PERS, help I fallen buttons, there's really the come take me to the hospital button or come pick me up. There's a lot is degraded by the time that point hits. So the idea here is to predict and to be able to help manage.
I'd say there was one other thing I wanted to talk about, the role of technology. There's a lot of people, I think, that get misled about apps because apps are so cool and everyone in the universe has a smartphone, right? So apps are going to solve everything. But when you actually look at the segment of the population that we're talking about, there's about 20 million people in the US who are actually need help, who actually are have chronic disease, are feeling vulnerable. That is the actual target market for a lot of these solutions. And they do not have smartphones. Sorry, folks. Their smartphone penetration in that group is under 5%. And so if you're going to solve the problem with them, we need to do it in some other way other than just apps. Now, it's going to change over time, but if we're talking about helping this population within the next 5 years, that's not going to be the way to do it. If we want to talk about 10, 15 years from now, great. Maybe apps is going to be the way it can happen. But I think that's a really important thing to look at the role of technology. We've got to think outside of just apps for the older consumer, because that's not where it's happening.
Do you agree, Clint?
Yeah, totally. There are so many points of failure with an app. I mean, how many times have you upgraded your OS and you lose the app and you have to go find it again and re-download it and you forget your password, you're going back in. So imagine if there's an elder out there that's doing that. And so from that perspective, I totally agree that this has to be passive. Now, a smartphone can be used, and both of our systems have smartphones in them. That's great. But we're also, what we're doing with Lively is very new. So as we work with resellers that are deploying this, part of a service we want them to offer is help them get the app loaded. That's a service. And then make sure the loved ones, the children, us, that we have the apps up and running. And I think there's a service there for me to get a call and make sure I have the app up and running and it's all correct and we all have the same passwords. So there is a lot of touch points with apps that are useful, but as David said, you can't rely on that now.
So for all the products that are being showcased here at the Sands and the Venetian and all that, are they typically being optimized for the benefit of the caregiver or the benefit of the senior? And what do you think is the right kind of prioritization between those two particular roles?
Well, all of the products out there, I mean, most of them are not geared towards older consumers. So there's no question, most of them are geared towards the younger audience. And that is where there is not as much of a problem today in terms of the costs that are being driven into the economy, whether it's through the healthcare system or through the unofficial caregiver cost that's hitting the economy. So I'd say most of those are being designed there. Some of them that are being designed for the older consumer, though, I do think really missed the mark because of the fact that, I mean, a lot of people think, we've said it here, there's all these words being thrown around, senior. Oh, the seniors. Guys, there's 43 million people in the US over 65 years old. This is not one segment of people, right? It really isn't. And you're doomed to fail if you get something stuck in your mind about who the senior is, whether maybe it's somebody who's confined to their home or whether it's somebody who is completely active and still married and has their spouse with them and they're pretty healthy. That's the range that you're looking at, and you've got to know which of those groups, or is it the transitioning senior that's in between them, which of those groups do you want to target and make sure your solutions are designed for that specific group, because you can't design it for everyone. It would be crazy.
Yeah, I would say also much of what we're seeing when we hear wearable, it's a point solution. It's me and that app and my data set, and that's it. What you need to think about is a longitudinal view, pulling in lots of data, not overloading, but so you have activity data. You've got, are they eating, are they drinking, what do the steps look like? There's so much more to pull together, so it's really a platform that we need to look at. I don't see too many platforms out there. They're good point solutions, but even when we talk about activity, what Lively did with this watch, they put an ultra simple accelerometer in here because they don't expect these folks to be climbing Everest or riding bikes 50 miles an hour. It's really to make sure that there's a cadence, maybe 2.5 miles an hour, the steps are collected. So we need to really think about it as a different segment when we look at wearables.
Got it. Real-time interception here. Let me mention that Chris Halls from Life360 has joined us. Chris, do you want to give a 2-second background to the audience on you and your company?
Sure. So my company is Life360. We are the world's largest family network with about 50 million families using our service to stay connected. Our core feature is a network, social network around mapping. So seeing where your family members are, knowing when people got to work, left home. So keeping your family safe and organized in one place.
Okay. David, I want to go back to you. You have a pretty broad product line. Clint, you've been in the space for a long time. You've seen a bunch of products and services out there for seniors. Is there any such notion of a Maslow hierarchy of needs in terms of what devices and solutions should be solving for first that meets senior needs and kind of moving up the hierarchy, or are they just very siloed use cases such that you can almost envision a world where a senior has 3 or 4 different things kind of affixed to him or her?
Again, it depends which senior you're talking about, because there's a lot of different segments, but I'd say the first thing is that our target customers don't buy technology for the sake of technology or because it's cool, right? Unlike probably a lot of people that are here at CES. We buy technology because it's cool and it's the latest and that's neat and I want to buy it. That absolutely is not happening. So it has to go to a deeper meaning for them to be buying it for themselves and for them to even wear it and use it. There has to be a benefit to them. It can't just be a benefit to the caregiver. If it's a benefit just to the caregiver, they're not going to use it. There has to be a dual benefit, something that I'm getting a benefit out of as the older consumer, and then you're getting a benefit out of it as the caregiver. Great, we've met in the middle, and now there's actually value being created in improving the productivity of that relationship and that caregiving relationship.
What's an example of that?
Well, I would say we've done things where where in a group, we've done focus groups where we've pulled the actual caregivers and the older consumer together in a room and helped try to design a product, going from being able to locate them specifically on a map to then the caregiver wanting that, to some of the older customers saying, that's too much for me, I want to be able to turn that feature off, and then say, okay, so we make that feature more customizable and instead just have more alerts saying mom's at the doctor's, mom's left the doctor's, mom's at home, instead of being able to actually track them on a map. So that was an example of kind of this balance between how you can strike a balance between the caregiver and the older consumer.
I would say I've been kicking tires for about 6 years now, looking at all these different solutions. And 6 years ago, we started off looking at blood pressure cuffs and weight scales and connected health, and that would do it. And then you realize, well, if these people have a chronic disease or they're not complying, there's a reason they're not complying. So what else can we look at? And so when we look at the elderly, it was thought, just give them these devices, and then we'll know when something's going south. Well, what if they don't take the readings? What if they don't comply, take the blood pressure, everything you need to do? So with the industry, both with with chronic disease, with wellness, with the elderly, what's coming down to be the paramount factor and the least expensive, theoretically, is activity. Activity is the greatest predictor of all of us. How is our health? what's happening with us? If your activity decreases, you see a steady decline. What is going wrong? And so I've done work with WHO workshops and the ITU and some others, and we had a workshop not long ago talking about activity. And the problem today is that, not the problem, but many of these, we get so excited about all these trackers that are in there. Some of them are really expensive, and they're trying to do too much. It's a piece of plastic with a protocol. We keep expecting so much from these. So the idea in this workshop is, what do we do about other countries where they can't deploy these types of devices? They don't have smartphones. And then it was thought, what about this country where people don't have $100 to spend on an activity tracker? So activity is becoming paramount. So if you could have one factor to watch, that would be it. It predicts the elderly patterns, but also, I just heard recently from a colleague that for the 30-day post-op, when you have 30-day recovery period, when someone just had an operation, this one set of doctors found out that activity was a better predictor than blood pressure and weight. Because what were they just doing before they took that blood pressure? So if we could start with one factor, that's becoming the most important, is really looking at.
That's interesting. So it sounds like activity is the key currency, in this new economy. Chris, I'm going to go to you. You guys have a really interesting view on the entire family. Talk about some of the dynamics, like who's the key person that anchors around your service first, and how do they bring in the other members?
Sure, so we're really focused on moms, and our core user is usually a female in her 40s, late 30s to mid 50s as well, and we're really focused on the caregiver side of the equation as it relates to this, because what we're doing is reducing the friction on the caregiver side. As everyone knows, you probably only use 5 or 6 apps on a regular basis, and we're not going to have a world where we have a zillion apps doing a zillion things. So what we're really building is a hub for the family. So we don't know which products will win from a hardware side for seniors, but what we can do is provide a very simple interface that the caregiver's already using, because our moms are already using us for the kids, and their husband who has a smartphone as they go through the day. It's a very natural plug-in if something on location or activity where it's just in the app they already use. So we think by reducing that friction and providing that single family hub, we can really help onboarding for these products for the various partners we'll work with.
Okay, let's change the conversation and start talking about some specific technology trends. And again, Chris, I'll start with you. You're smartphone based, you're an app. What are technology trends specific to the smartphone that you leverage that allow you guys to do what you do today that you couldn't have done a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago?
Sure. So some of it's pure technology, and some of it's more just cultural norms and how people use tech to get through the day. So first, just on a norm standpoint, it is becoming very common that the smartphone is that remote control for your family, for your life. It's not just something you use to make phone calls. And these aren't necessarily new ideas. Apple had the Newton in '93, but it's really becoming practical now. And that kind of translates into the pure tech side, where you're getting much more powerful smartphones with much better battery life, better location technology, better network connectivity at very low price points. So we're seeing a confluence of the tech getting exponentially better while the market is similarly maturing, and that's why it's those two factors that are accelerating everything in a big way.
Deb, for your products?
Well, for us, it's a similar thing. We're just continuing to leverage technology as it evolves. I think we're kind of the antithesis of what's actually happening in the marketplace. So I guess one of those companies that's going off to the left while everyone's going to the right. So while we play in apps and we work in apps and we have Android-based devices that we use to update apps, we're really still trying to make sure what we're delivering are the appropriate devices for our target customers. And we still have a huge amount of demand for people who want a phone as their primary device that they can actually use as a phone. And so what we've done is made that really smart by leveraging technology that we can put apps on that phone and continue to evolve that. So for us, it's a little strange as we have continued to to invest in older technology, because we find that's what our customers actually want to use. And the key with keeping older customers engaged in these solutions is they have to actually want to use the connectivity device that they've been given. So if you give them something and say, here you go, Mom, I want you to start carrying this and start using this, and it's going to be tracking this and doing this for you, and it's going to be sending me all this information, it's not going to happen, right? They actually have to want it. And so by handing them a device that they're going to use, that has great customer service with it, and just some of the basics, so they go, okay, great, I want this, I'm going to carry it with me. Now you've got connectivity. Once you have connectivity, everything else can flow from that. But if you don't have the initial connectivity, connected health doesn't work.
Okay. Clint?
I think what's really enabled this, the point we're at today, is a couple of things: Moore's law and standards, in the sense that 6-7 years ago, the connected health hub that the VA used, I won't go into any company's names, was $1,000, and it plugged into the wall, and it plugged into a blood pressure cuff and a scale. $1,000. That was about 6 years ago. We're at the point now where, with the developments of systems on a chip, where companies can basically build a cell phone functionality on a chip, you can take Bluetooth profiles and have them on a chip, that third parties, especially ones we're dealing with in Asia, can pull together and build one of those hubs for under $100. So that's the first thing, is Moore's law. The second is standards. So how many of you started using Bluetooth and started trying to pair things about 4 or 5 years ago? Remember what a pain that was? Well, one of the groups I was actually chairman and president of a group called Continua, which is the world's only standards body for connected health. We started working with the Bluetooth SIG to develop profiles into Bluetooth low energy. You should have a glucose meter, a blood pressure cuff. When you bought that system on a chip, it was already there. So it's easy now, much easier for companies to get blood pressure cuffs connected, to get scales connected. So if you notice now when you go into an Apple store, it's easy to connect that stuff. And a lot of that was from the standards perspective. So it's really turned much of what we see in the healthcare industry on its head. And I look at the old healthcare industry as the old military complex with all those, remember the $500 hammer? I forget when that was. 20 years ago they were talking about that? That was in the press. That's the old world. And so now it's really enabling new companies to come in with these new technologies. So that to me has been the big catalyst.
Okay. Let's talk about distribution strategy. To get a lot of these neat technologies in the hands of seniors and also to be working with caregivers, what's the appropriate model? Is it most likely going to be a direct-to-consumer model? Is that the only way to kind of do it? So we're all pitching wares to mom? Are there other channels and sales kind of organizations that can help out? What's your view on this?
I guess I'll start. We do a lot of it through just traditional direct-to-consumer markets. So whether it's retail, we actually believe in pharmacy a lot. We've just done a big deal with Walmart Pharmacy and Rite Aid Pharmacy for distributing our products and services. We think that's a great channel about independence and staying healthy for these type of offerings. But other than that, then it's just continuing to work on the web, and through Amazon is another big one that we distribute through. So we really work in that area. We found that's what has gotten us to where we are today, which is a fairly large company. While we've been looking at the commercial space and thinking, are people going to want to put these solutions into their older Medicare or Medicare Advantage patients' hands so that they can lower their cost of actually serving them? I think it will happen someday, but it sure doesn't. It's not clear when that's going to happen, and it still is not clear. So in the meantime, we really believe that going direct to consumer, especially at reasonable prices, there is a large group of people willing to pay to stay safe and to help keep their mom safe.
I think there's also a big trend on the mobile side. It hasn't really hit in this vertical yet, but it's the whole concept of freemium products and giving consumers a value before you ask them for money. And in hardware, that's very hard, but in software, it's exceptionally easy. So at Life360, we sign up over 1.2 million families a month, and our marketing budget is $0. So it's going to be a while before Life360 really integrates with guys like you, but when it hits, I think that is going to be a big trend that not just driven by us, but tons of companies that build these huge, critical, massive, engaged users that love products that are very willing purchasers, and then that will turn into a pretty big channel over time. Not there yet, but I think it's something to watch, and you can look at what's happened with games in particular. Those similar trends are going to flow into other products where you need to give people something of value before you ask them for money.
One thing we did right away at Lively, which we had done at Qualcomm Life, was to go to a group called Ingram Micro. Has anyone heard of Ingram Micro? Don't worry if you haven't. So it's the world's largest distributor, and they don't market. You never really hear much about these guys, but chances are your TV or your whatever electronic device you have in your home, devices were probably distributed somehow, some way, touched by Ingram. So that was our first strategy, was to do that. And then downstream, they have value-added resellers. And so we're just getting it loaded now, and so now the next step is to go educate them on what would happen. And it's also large-scale entities. Like I'm in conversations right now with Meals on Wheels. There's a perfect organization that's in touch with all of these people. So then we'll have to figure out, do they become a distributor and carry it, or do we use different strategies? So there are a few different, we're trying. It'll eventually be direct to consumer, no doubt, but in the early days, it takes a lot of marketing dollars to go to the consumer, a lot. So hopefully what will happen is that by word of mouth and as Lively grows, those marketing dollars will come. But right now, we're looking for the big whales to start.
I wish my marketing budget was 0.
I wish we got revenue from each of our customers.
There's the trade-off.
Right. I'm curious for your thoughts on big data and the role software plays in this game. If you walk around the halls and some of the other tracks here in digital health and fitness, they often talk about the role of algorithms to kind of interpret as well as extrapolate certain things. What is it, if we're so focused here on connectivity, communications, and simpler might be better, what's the role of software and in particular some of this new data science that's going on elsewhere in healthcare?
Sure, I think it's, in terms of the context of taking care of people, I think it has to be as quiet as possible. I don't think any consumer cares about big data whatsoever, but if you can just make something magical happen, that's pretty cool. And so as an example of what Life360 does, it could tie in to aging in place. We did a deal with ADT, the world's largest home security company, where if all your family members are out of the house, which is data that we provide, your doors will lock, your thermostat goes down, your home security system arms. That's big data and having a very simple application. And a lot of people, if you have a garage, you've probably had that moment like, did I leave the garage door open? If we can solve that problem with our database of knowing where your family member is and the state of your home, that's a very mundane but powerful use case. And I think we're going to see a lot of things in the elder care space. What if, if you're, this is perhaps a bit crude, but if your grandpa or elderly parent flushed the toilet in the morning and there's a sensor on the handle, it's a data play and doesn't sound too exciting in the press, but a lot of applications from things like that.
Yep. Yeah, I think algorithms are the ultimate way to handle all of this because you're going to have way too much data. And this is what scares the healthcare industry, is all this data. Well, exception-based algorithms should alleviate a lot of that. You only are alerted when something is wrong, and there might be a call center that will triage initially. So the algorithms are absolutely paramount to all of this. I think a lot of people get scared with all the data, but you just have to show them how to manage it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing some amazing things with some smaller companies. There's a company called Biosensics that we're working with on fall detection, and because it's not just fall detection, now with big data we can get into fall prediction, and we can really start to use data to really understand more about what's actually happening with our customers. So the amount of data that we get coming off of our devices, everything from as simple as knowing whether anyone in their caregiver network has actually called them this week and talked to them, or exchanged messages with them. So by knowing that, I can then go back to you and say, hey, nobody's called mom this week, somebody should reach out to her and let her know through an app so that you can go, great, I'm going to talk to mom.
Great. So my last question for each of you before we open it up for Q&A from the audience is, what's your prediction for this calendar year 2015, and what will we be talking about in this space a year from now at this event?
Well, I think in general, this whole theme of connected devices and IoT and big data, I think it's the absolute, in the short and mid run, it's the most overhyped thing in the world. I think where there are going to be a lot of people saying, see, I told you so, this is all a bunch of hooey, but then in 5 or 6 or 7 years, it's going to have completely changed people's lives, and the people who are bullish in the long run are absolutely right, but I think we all need to have a bit of patience to see things emerge, because there are a ton of moving parts that still have to be in place. And I think with all our companies, we've solved big pieces of the puzzle, and there's going to be a big kind of aha moment, I think, for this whole industry where it all lines up, but probably a little bit longer than people are thinking.
Yep. David?
I would say, if I was going to say something really big could happen, I don't think it's going to be this year, but close enough, is some reimbursement around telehealth, around telehealth. It's already started on a small scale this year, if anyone's been following it, with a whole bunch of stipulations around it, but it has started. If it really did start to increase where there could be some reimbursement around keeping people out of the hospital using telehealth and improving their outcomes, especially of older consumers, that would be a massive turning point for the entire industry.
And as that happens in parallel, I think that you're going to see more of a consumerization and people realizing that they've got to begin to get these tools together. And you'll see companies like Walgreens, they had an announcement with Qualcomm today about pulling together these longitudinal kits that will help people. So I think you'll see the consumerization, but then what will happen is that the government will see that this is helping. And this is what's happening in Scandinavia. They'll start it, but they fully expect the consumers to hopefully take it over for some of the elders that don't qualify.
Great. We have time for questions, or we're good?
We actually don't.
Okay.
I don't think anyone could do a question in 10 seconds, but maybe it's possible. I want to thank Michael, Clint, David, Chris for a great session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.